If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
What chance do we have? The question is, what choice? Run, hide, plead for mercy, scatter your forces. You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission. The time to fight is now.
Yes.
Every moment you waste is another step closer to the ashes of Jeddah.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Mugwump Tower, this is Albatross 1-3, requesting permission to land, over.
I don't need a computer to tell me how to land a damn airplane.
6.
Heads-up display, check.
5,
Lasers, check.
4,
Particle beam, check.
3,
Photon bolts, check.
2,
Chair control, check.
1.
Let's do it.
Broadcasting from a secret underground location somewhere in Mos Eisley, this is the Docking Bay 77 podcast. Make yourself comfortable. The show is about to start. Hello and welcome to the Docking Bay 77 podcast. I am your host, Dayton Johnson. No Jedi here anymore. Only dreamers like this fool here. Yep, I'm the fool. I'm a dreamer. And I've brought along some fanatics, some rebels, and some other dreamers along with me for this particular episode. And here we go. Our very own K2SO. He has a tendency to say everything that comes into his mind, into his circuits, whenever he wants to. It is Disney John. How's it going?
How did I know that was mine? Oh my goodness. All right. Yes, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
And my favorite coffee master, Andrew Blakely. How's it going?
I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I'm psyched to be here.
And one of my favorite comic book nerds, Scott Hoffman. How's it going, Scott?
Hey, great. I'm just glad you didn't call me Borgullet.
All right. Yes, I wouldn't do that. You know, it's creepy and disgusting and fabulous all at the same time. Anyway. Okay. And welcoming to the podcast for the first time, the best voice in podcasting and the host of his own podcast. It is John Reid of the 30-something movie podcast. How's it going, John?
Do you want to know the probability that I'm going to love this movie? It's high.
Very high.
I'm good. I'm great. It's good to see you again. And I feel like was the last time that we were together, we had the Tri-Podcast Star Wars trivia show. Was that the last time?
No, it was the 80s movies discussion.
It's the 80s movie. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still traumatized by the Star Wars trivia one. So
yeah, well, you knew that was Hebrew on Vader's chest, so I should have just conceded at that point.
Oh, John, that was you? Oh my God! Let me bow down to you, sir, because I was like, I never knew that. Like, holy moly!
That was one of those moments where, and I'll show that I have a fandom that bridges all kinds of gaps. I was sitting around talking with some people. It was actually a school board meeting, the school district I work for. And I knew one or two of them were Star Trek fans. So we're sitting around, we're talking, and somebody said something about, John, you'd appreciate this. My sister-in-law showed me a picture of somewhere they had been, and they had one of those Klingon swords. And he goes, and of course, I know what that is. And I said, well, was it a batleth or a mechleth? And that was the end of the conversation. Job. So if anybody knows a school district that's hiring, it was
like, you're lucky I got Klingon out of that.
Right? That's fantastic. I love it. So, John, for people that for my listeners that may not be familiar with your podcast, why don't you tell people what you guys do?
Yeah, so we are the 30-something movie podcast, and we are actually a group of friends that, for the most part, we all worked in the same school together, and we'd sit around during our lunch periods in the teacher's lounge and just talk movies. One of our guys, I think he's a screenplay writer at heart. He wishes he had gone into Hollywood and done work there. So he taught a digital film class where he'd teach kids how to make movies, and one of us is a band teacher, and so he's got all the musical knowledge and kind of brings that to it. And, Jeff is kind of an old soul when it comes to performances and music and everything else. He's worked in a theater before, so he brings some of that to it. And I don't know what I bring to it, but we're all there. I think I kind of just bring everybody together is what I do. But we're sitting around, we're like, hey, we talk about this all the time. I'd love to do a podcast. You guys want to do a podcast with me? And I think we're like 8 years later. We're still going.
Right.
I think we're just about to hit our 500th episode is coming out next week.
Wow.
We've been doing this for a while, but the premise of our show is the reason it's called 30 something movie podcast was because every year we do movies that are hitting their 30th anniversary. So this year, 2023, all of our movies have been 1993. Next year, all of our movies will be 94. So that's kind of the premise. That kind of guarantees that if we want to, we'll just keep going because
right.
Until something catastrophic happens, there's always going to be a next year.
Right. I'm looking forward to that when you get to 1999 because for that decade, it's probably the best year in movies for that decade. Just because it's just sick how many great movies came out in 99.
That was one of our co-hosts, Pat. I mean, he gets very excited about everything, and that was one of his first things when we started in 2015. One of our very first episodes, I said, Pat, what movie are you most excited for us to cover? And I was thinking he'd say something from 1985, 1986. He goes, Batman. I said, Pat, I don't think there was a Batman movie between 1985 and not until 1989. He's like, yeah, I know. you're going to co-host this show with me for 4 years until we get to the movie you're looking forward to. He's like, no, I'm looking forward to everything else in between. But I'm looking forward to Batman. Like, all right, well, guarantees we're going to go at least 4 years. Right. Yeah, it's a great premise because you'll never run out of things to talk about. That's awesome.
No kidding.
Awesome.
We also have to talk about some stinkers, though. That's part of the issue. But
yeah, that's true.
Sometimes the stinkers are more fun to talk about.
Yes, that is very true. I've had that privilege a couple of times, not on this podcast, but on other ones instead. So, whatever. Anyway. All right. So before we get on to a couple of other things into the movie, I have a couple stories and some feedback I want to touch on. So first of all, I know Scott is part of the con men from the Film By podcast and goes to cons and meets some people. And recently, unfortunately, I don't think you were at that one, but Jeff, like I say, thanks to Jeff, met Mary McDonnell at one of the pods or one of the cons and talked to her. And she was as delightful as you would think she is, and was talking to her and was able to go back to her table and talk to her again and mention this pod and that we covered Dances with Wolves. And he proceeded to get an autograph of her signed to me, from Stands with a Fist. And I think it's friggin' fantastic. And I will definitely put it up on my wall because as people that listen to the show know how much I truly love Dances with Wolves, as well as the remake Battlestar Galactica. So that's a win-win for me. So thanks again, Jeff. I appreciate you doing that for me. Also, we had a new listener reach out with some feedback on one of our episodes. Jason Coslett reached out to us with his top 7 childhood fictional characters that inspired or influenced him. And this is quite a list. So in no particular order, we have Dirk Pitt, Clive Cussler character, because he raised the Titanic. Optimus Prime, I always admired his intellect and his integrity. Roy Neary from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Friendly Alien Contact and Going into Space, which I understand that. Dr. Gregory House MD, always needing to find the answer. Chris Knight from Real Genius, great choice. Smart enough to find the answers, but cynical enough to keep looking. Randall Pink Floyd from Dazed and Confused. Teenager who had a great outlook on life and still knew more how to have fun. That's a good list. And of course, Indiana Jones. Indy is the man, intelligence, integrity, action. And he goes, I know House is a cheat because it didn't come out 35 years ago when I was a kid. So if you can't use that one, he says, I'm going to go with Destro from G.I. Joe because he really was the glue that kept Cobra together. So Jason Coslett, that's a fantastic list. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. We encourage all of our listeners to reach out to us, some feedback on any of our episodes, and we will read it on the air. So thanks again, Jason. If you haven't noticed by some of the hints dropped earlier, we are discussing what I consider to be the best made Star Wars movie ever. It is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story.
Jin, whatever I do it to protect you. So you understand?
I understand.
You want to get out of here?
Our rebellion is all that remains to push back the Empire. We think you might be able to help us.
When was the last time you were in contact with your father?
What is this?
It appears he is critical to the development of a super weapon.
If my father built this thing, we need to find him.
All right. How many do I need?
They are requesting a call sign.
It's, Rogue. Rogue One.
The power that we are dealing with here is immeasurable.
If the Empire has this kind of power, what chance do we have?
We have hope. Rebellions are built on hope. They've no idea we're coming.
Take hold of this moment. The Force is strong. Make 10 men feel like 100.
We'll take the next chance. And the next. You're all rebels, aren't you?
Save the rebellion! Save the dream!
So before we get into this particular movie, I have a question for the group. Now, our first Star Wars episode was a two-parter. It was comparing the prequels to the Disney era trilogy. Now, Andrew was not able to be on those episodes, and Scott was on the first part and had to bow out for the second one. So I'm going to give those guys and the rest of the group here a chance to answer a question I posed to that group. Between those two trilogies, which one is actually a better made trilogy?
I mean, Dayton, we've talked, I love parts of the Disney era trilogy. I think Last Jedi, I'm sad I wasn't there to get your back on that, but
I'm sad you weren't there either.
But I can't say that they're a better made trilogy than the original. That'd be
really
silly. Yeah.
Not the original. We're talking about the prequels.
The prequels, excuse me. Yes. The prequels are definitely not without their flaws, but I think it's a more cohesive story. It makes sense. It knew where it was going. And I think that's fundamentally, if a story doesn't have a direction, or if it's constantly changing its direction every movie, I can't get behind it.
All right. What about you, Scott?
So you said this is between the prequels and the sequels, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with prequels. Yeah.
I'm getting no love. I thought I was going to get some support. I'm not. Damn.
See, the trick is that, when I look at, production, I'd probably have to lean, special effects and all this other kind of stuff. I would definitely want to lean into the sequels because of getting back into practical effects and not using all the green screens and whatever. But as far as story and something that really moved things forward, as much as it was flawed, I would have to say probably the prequels, knowing that how much it's, inspired since then.
All right. Disney John, thoughts?
You're going to be shocked at this. I'm going to go prequels. I mean, because you're talking about story, and Disney's known for their stories, and I don't think that they pulled it through with the last three movies. I don't think the sequels were story-driven enough because they didn't have an end. They had to, by nature of it, leave it kind of open-ended, and I think that the prequels had a distinct ending because they had to marry with the middle set. And I think story-wise, I would go prequels. But Scott, I agree with you. For production and everything else, I much prefer the sequels.
Right.
You asked for overall story, and then it's going to be the prequels for that, which guts me because I don't like them.
I totally agree with that answer. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, John Reid, thoughts?
So, a point of clarification, because you guys keep calling it the sequel trilogy. My understanding was it ended after episode 8. There was a 9th movie.
That is also the right answer.
I must have missed something. I know there was something came out, and I like to refer to it as the rise of my blood pressure. But yeah, so I mean, based on that alone, the fact that it's 2 movies versus 3 movies, I guess I got to go prequels. For some of the same reasons you guys have mentioned. Like I do enjoy the more practical effects in the other movies. I really enjoy, and if Jason Colvin from the Shirley Can't Be Serious podcast hears this, he's going to come attack me somehow. I really enjoy The Last Jedi. Like
So do I.
Enjoy that movie.
Yeah.
For a lot of the things that it did. The prequels got so much wrong because they didn't flesh out the story that I fleshed out in my mind playing with my action figures. I had a really good sense of what the Clone Wars was about and what everything was going to look like. And George just didn't take any of my feedback at all. So that's the knock I have. That and some of the acting is the knock I have against the prequels. But I will agree. I think, the prequels are overall is a much more cohesive story, even though some of the story is a little boring.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love the taxation of trade routes? It keeps me up at night. But yeah, for those reasons, I think I got to go prequels as well.
All right. Well, whatever. I disagree, but that's fine.
But more,
those are not the answers we needed.
I'm going to quote one of my co-hosts and say more Star Wars, more better. So it really,
right.
I'm going to watch all of them. I'm going to watch all 8 of them that came out.
Okay. So here's,
see, you got a different 8 than I do because I didn't know there was a first movie. So
whatever. So my thing is, had the fans not cried like little babies about The Last Jedi, then maybe the third movie would have been more cohesive and fit. But since it cried like little babies, and that's not what we wanted, and they had to kiss their ass. They had to kiss their ass.
No, they didn't have to kowtow. They could have.
But they did, and that's what they did. They brought back in J.J. Abrams and said, "Try to fix this."
That's why they failed. Well, they should have kept JJ for the entire thing. I think it would have been a better and more cohesive story.
Yes, it would have been. Or maybe because they had the ending. They knew that the Emperor was coming back. Okay.
Right.
Just
somehow.
Well, they knew he was because there was the Aftermath series of books that were already coming out when the trilogies were coming out, or the sequels, and they were hinting to his return too. Mm-hmm. So this was something that was planned. How they got there was probably not so much, figured out, but either way, to me, if I'm going to sit down and somebody says, which one are you going to watch? I'm saying, I'm watching the sequels because there's.
Oh, amen. Yes. 100%. I agree with that.
So in my mind, that means they're better because I'm going to choose to watch them over the.
But you didn't, that's not what your question
I know,
was.
but that's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm looking at it because the dialogue in 2 of the 3 movies in the prequels are awful. But
oh god, yeah, terrible.
So,
but you asked about a whole complete story. If you ask which one I would rather sit down to, it's always going to be the sequels.
Is it though? Sorry. Anyway, go back and visit those 2 episodes for all my problems with the, and listen to how much hate I got for The Last Jedi. But anyway, jeez.
Tune into our next episode to hear us talk about Rogue One.
No, not
enough Ewan McGregor in this one, in my opinion.
What? No.
There you go.
All right, that's it. I'm gonna mute Scott. All right. All right. So moving on to Rogue One. Some opening thoughts. When and where did you guys see the movie? Any opening thoughts? John Reid, you're our guest. Why don't you go first?
Yeah. So first time I saw this one was the night it came out. Was Thursday, December. I remember it vividly. It was Thursday, December 15th, 2016 at about 7:20 p.m. It was, thankfully, as opposed to when I was in high school and episode 1 came out, I didn't have to wait till 12:01 a.m. to see the first movie. They switched it to Thursdays at 7:30.
Right.
So I was in my seat as soon as it came out. I was ready for this movie. I was enraptured by the trailer, of which only probably 30% of that ended up in the movie. But, it's as soon as I saw a movie, here's my initial thoughts too. I was really intrigued. I love the Jedi. I absolutely love the Jedi. I love the whole lore and the mysticism of the whole thing. But to see a movie come out in which my understanding was there would be no Jedi in this movie, and we get to see kind of the backstory and how does the rebellion get along without these mystical figures that are doing their high level battle over everything, over good and evil. What are the humans doing? What are the regular everyday people doing? What's the struggle look like for the people that can't make things float through the air and snap people's necks with a swish of their hand? Yeah, I saw that trailer and I was like, this is like some of my favorite war movies, but It's Star Wars. So I'm on board. Whatever you want to show me, I'm ready to go.
Right. Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I was opening day too. I don't think I made it to the opening show. I think I had to get to the second one, so it was like an 8:30 show. But Star Wars has come and gone in my life because I find Star Wars fans often so obnoxious, especially online.
Yes.
So I got to agree with John in that I was so excited to see something that had nothing to do with the Skywalker family, had nothing to do with Jedi. Some of my favorite Star Wars books were the Han Solo trilogy because I just love exploring the world outside of that one narrative through line. So I was 100% here for it, and I love rewatching it for this. I love even now watching it again after having seen Andor. Like it's still I get excited to watch this movie, and I can't say that about most of the other Star Wars anymore. I think some of the sheen has worn off of a lot of them, but not this one.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, I was also opening weekend. I think it was opening night. It was one of those, late night showings. I think it was a Cinebistro, but it was everything that I wanted. And, points that have already been raised absolutely are true for me. I had goosebumps with this movie. It was a great heist movie, a great war movie. It demonstrated that you could have other genres that kind of play within the Star Wars universe, which I thought opened up enormous potential. And that it didn't have the central, the Jedi as central figures, was some of the fresh new thinking that I was really excited to see what they're going to do next.
Very good. Disney John?
I saw this on December 17th. I had to go back and figure out which day I actually saw it on, but I found it. It was December 17th, and I'll be honest with you. So the ramp up to it, I mean, I'm always excited for a new Star Wars movie. Always. I'm always going to give it its chance, and I didn't know what to expect from this movie. And when I was done, I was like, I think I've just witnessed the perfect movie before my eyes. Like nobody lived. It was death. It was destruction. I always thought that the Revenge of the Sith was a great, like, number 3 to number 4. I always thought that was a great marriage between the two movies, and then I was proven wrong when Rogue One came out because that was the story that was never told. And I went out, and I remember my wife, she was crying at the end of the movie, but it was like because it was a perfect movie. We had witnessed perfection. So everything else falls a little short from there.
All right. So as I mentioned on our first Star Wars episode, I've had the privilege of seeing all the Star Wars movies in the theater.
Preach.
Yeah, so I'm that old. So when Disney was releasing a Christmas or a Star Wars movie on Christmas every year for a while, not only did we see it on opening night, but for my birthday, which is 5 days after Christmas, my birthday request is we're going to see the current Star Wars movie. So I saw it again for my birthday, which of course is awesome. It's nice to have that option. Yes, it's my birthday. I call it. So I love this movie. As I said earlier, I think it's the best made of all the Star Wars movies. Sorry, Empire. I know we have people that say, oh, it's that one. No, it's not. I love the characters. I love the darker tone, the gritty look, the fact that all the characters die at the end. It's great. They set out to make a World War II movie in the Star Wars galaxy and nailed it 100%. It is by far and away the most emotional of all the Star Wars movies and has the most interesting characters as far as I'm concerned. It totally stands on its own, and it doesn't need, it marriages those other movies, but you don't need to see those other movies to enjoy this one. And I think that's something that we've been lacking from the Star Wars universe the whole time. So like I said, I love it. I have my Rogue One t-shirt on currently. I have the special edition behind me, which has the DVD, the Blu-ray special, behind the bonus features, and a 3D version of the movie, which I will never watch. And it also has the ability to change the covers, which is really, really cool. And of course, I had to buy it as soon as I saw it. And I also have the 2 LP vinyl score behind me as well from Michael Giacchino, who was amazing. And I have a board game called Star Wars Outer Rim. And you can play as many of the smugglers and scoundrels in the universe, including Lando Calrissian and Han Solo. I always play as Jyn. She also made my list of the top 7 badass women in movies. Please go check out that episode. Scott was on that episode too. Mm-hmm. There's an Aunt May conspiracy on that episode. That's right. That really upset some people, but I loved it. So anyway, go back and check that out. It was a fantastic episode as well. So if nothing else to say, we're going to move on.
That's the fact, Jack! That's the fact, Jack!
It's time for That's the Fact, Jack. This is where we cover some production history and some facts about the movie. So, Scott, you have some production history. What do you got for us?
Yeah, and there's a lot to say about this, and I'm going to keep it kind of brief so that we can all get through all the comments I'm sure we have to say about this. Was the first in a planned series of Star Wars standalone anthology series, which came about as an idea pitched by John Knoll, who's the chief creative officer and senior visual effects supervisor at ILM. He's got a great backstory. Just to take an off ramp for a second, was dropped off at the age of 15 at ILM by looking them up in the phone book and saying, "I'm a model maker. I'd like to do more of that." And they said, "Sure, come spend the day." Like, it's every kid's dream for that original trilogy. He's worked on the prequels, the special editions, the Distinguished Competition, namely Star Trek Generations, First Contact, TNG, and DS9, as well as the Abyss and the Pirates movies. He also, I was surprised to learn, created Photoshop with his brother Thomas. I had no idea.
I did not know that either.
But he pitched this idea inspired by the opening scroll of A New Hope, telling the tale of rebel spies who stole plans to the Death Star, based on an unproduced script that he wrote for the Star Wars live-action TV show. The screenplay was written by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy, directed by Gareth Edwards, and stars Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn, Riz Ahmed, Donna Yen, John Wayne, Forrest Whitaker, Mads Mikkelsen, and Alan Tudyk. The score was composed by Michael Giacchino, as you mentioned, which makes this the first live-action Star Wars movie without John Williams doing the score. A massive production. I was surprised how quick it was produced. Began principal photography in August of 2015, shot in 4 countries on 7 sound stages across 2 backlots and 3 sprawling UK locations, drawing a lot of stylistic inspiration from Ralph McQuarrie's designs from the 70s to create something new that fit seamlessly with A New Hope. A little over a year later, it was released in December 2016 between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Budget of $265 million, one of the most expensive films ever made, but it made more than $1 billion worldwide, the 20th highest grossing films ever. Received 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Sound Mixing and Best Visual Effects. High praise from critics and fans, and in my opinion is one of the best films in the franchise. Totally agree.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The director, Gareth Edwards. Andrew, you have some facts about him.
Yeah, so Gareth Edwards is Welsh and British, grew up born in the 70s, and as a young man saw Star Wars and said, even as a child, that is what made him want to get into film. So before he became a director that we all love, it's probably not a huge surprise that he was into visual effects. He studied film at Surrey Institute of Art and Design, and Warwickshire College of Technology and Art, and basically everywhere he went sounded British as hell. But he worked as visual effects for a few TV shows, including Nova, Perfect Disaster, and Heroes and Villains. None of those sounded particularly familiar to me. They're all British shows. But in 2008, he entered into a 48-hour film competition, which, if you're not familiar, are a lot of fun. You get a prompt, and you have 48 hours from receiving the prompt and the requirements to have a completed project.
Wow.
We actually had one of those filmed in our coffee shop recently. They filmed a couple scenes there. It's hectic, but fun. And after the success of that, where he did win, he created the movie Monsters in 2010. Yes. Now, this is a very low budget, very small film, only 2 actors and a production team of 5 people. But it's amazing. It's one of those ones I stumbled across and just streamed, not knowing anything about it. And I was blown away by its minimalism. When he does use effects, they're very effective. It's fantastic. The success of that got him Godzilla, the reboot, which, while not a perfect film, I think really showed what he was capable of, and that the success of Godzilla is what made Disney approach him to direct Rogue One. He obviously has gotten a lot of attention for this, and was even going to be coming back to direct the sequel, King of Monsters, the sequel to Godzilla. Decided to step back to focus on more personal projects. And now in theaters, well, in some places, you can see The Creator, which is his most recent project. I was surprised with the success and the big budget films he's made that those are the only 4 credits he has as director. While he has participated in others as producer or visual effects, those 4 movies represent his entire body of work.
Now, I had the privilege and pleasure of seeing The Creator in the theater. Has anybody else seen it?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I really, really want to, but I keep getting overridden by my family to see other things.
It's
same.
It is a lot better than I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting to be good. And I remember seeing the trailer for it, and all I saw was from the director of Rogue One. I said, I'm there. And Jeff and I went to see it. And there's what made it really good is, aside from the fact that the CG is the best CG you have ever seen. Okay. It looks amazing. Everything in this movie is just fantastic. But there's a deeper story to it, which I really, really appreciated. And I'm going to take a minute to blame people that want to complain that Hollywood runs out of ideas. Oh, they've run out of story. Whatever. Okay, so stop buying tickets to the 10th remake of the same movie if you want something else. The creator barely made $100 million. Okay, luckily it made its budget. So you can't sit there and say, I want something new and then not go see something new. So you have to put your money where your mouth is and go see something different. And The Creator was that movie, and people did not go see it. And it's a crime. It is on my Christmas list, and I can't wait to open that up and put it in that day to watch it because it is fantastic. So I have seen all of his movies, obviously. And actually my least favorite was probably Godzilla, because I was the one I was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
So some other facts I found about Rogue One. It has a runtime of 134 minutes. The pre-sale of the tickets crashed ticket websites like Fandango after only 10 minutes of being on sale. And in the 24-hour period was second only to The Force Awakens. It was the second highest grossing film of 2016 behind Captain America Civil War. It made $81 million in revenue on home video, putting it third that year behind Moana and the live-action Beauty and the Beast. Praised for its acting, its visuals, its darker tone and look, and cinematography. As we mentioned, it did spawn the Disney Plus spinoff Andor, which is amazing. But personally, what I would love to see is a Jyn Erso Disney Plus show. You had 15 years from the time the parents left to the time we see this movie. So we got plenty of time for her to see what she was like, because she's an absolute badass in this movie. And I want to see her earlier on. So that's my request from Disney. Let's make that happen. All right. Any other facts anybody came across before we move on? Right.
No, I'll just second the request for a Jyn show, because I mean you've got Saw Gerrera,
right,
performed by Forrest Whitaker, and I just thought did an amazing job. We could see so much more of that, and kind of maybe another faction that aligns with the Rebel Alliance but doesn't necessarily agree with what they're doing. Some more guerrilla tactics. That'd be interesting,
right? Well, she was already his best soldier when she was 16, so
right.
Just saying. There's a lot of story to tell there. So, all right.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the fantastic things that I was thinking rewatching this is there's so many great things that none of them, I want more of everything. We can't have a 10-hour movie, but every time a new thing comes on the screen, like, give me more of that guy. I want to see, no, more of that, more Mads Mikkelsen, come on, keep it coming.
Right. I was just happy to see Mads Mikkelsen playing a nice guy for once. He seems to always play the villain. So I was like, hey, he's nice. I like that. All right. So let's move on.
That was totally wicked!
It's time for That Was Totally Wicked. These are things we love about the movie. So, John, once again, you're our guest. You get to go first. Something that you love about this movie.
All right. So I'm going to start my timer for about 2 hours.
Right?
While I start listing everything. I mean, there's not much I don't love about this movie. It does so much of what I want out of a Star Wars movie. It takes and expands the lore of everything. I mean, I consumed every possible Star Wars book that existed, every comic book, every book. I feel like I've read just about everything, up to a certain point, and then I had kids, and I haven't read a book since 2007.
That happens.
But I mean, of all the things that I imagined in my mind, what this would look like, and I mentioned before, some of the prequels disappointed me, but it's because in my mind, this is what I expected pre-Empire Jedi to look like. This is what I expected them to act like. This is what I expected the Jedi Order to be like. And a lot of stuff in the prequels, while I enjoyed the prequels, it did not live up to what I had built up in my mind. Now,
Right.
I wasn't one of those, we've mentioned them earlier. I wasn't one of those Star Wars fans that was like, "Well, you ruined my childhood." You ruined my childhood. My childhood is still intact. My childhood is okay.
Yeah, that's not how those things work.
Yeah, it just didn't, George and I just didn't agree on certain things, and that's okay. He's paying for it. So if I paid for it, I'd get to have some of my input in there. But that's what I love about this movie is it takes so much of what I loved about the original trilogy and actually makes it better. I know you're going to ask, I think later on something about one of our favorite movies in the whole series, but one of my thoughts about the original trilogy, and especially once this one came out, is I know a lot of people will say, well, that movie totally ruined this other movie for me, or that movie now ruins a whole bunch of stuff in episode 4, or that. For me, it was the exact opposite. Like, I watched this movie, and then immediately, I think after being in the theater, I think I immediately came home and watched the original Star Wars, 1977 Star Wars, and I was like, I didn't think that movie could be better. Rogue One made that movie better.
Yeah,
100%.
That's not to diminish. That's not to diminish Star Wars, but everything I saw in Rogue One, I now had an even better appreciation for what they had in Star Wars in the 1977 movie. So, to me, that's why this movie is so far up there on my list of favorite movies of all time, but also favorite Star Wars movies. Is it didn't diminish anything. It only added to what was already there. The characters overall, this movie, I think, is probably the best made Star Wars movie because the cinematography is amazing.
Yes.
The acting is great. Of all the things, even in the original trilogy, some of the acting is pretty campy.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of,
I'm shocked.
A little 77, baby.
Well, I'm being kind. The acting in this is not campy. It's the kind of acting you would expect from like the highest quality movie. The only thing that does not fit that is the guy that goes, "Rogue One, there is no Rogue One." That one's a little over the top, but other than that, all the other acting is awesome. It's, some people will be like, well, there's sci-fi movie acting and then there's actual movie acting. This feels more like actual movie acting.
Right.
The direction, the visual style of the whole thing, the movie is just beautiful. I actually have it playing right now on an iPad. And I'm having trouble focusing on what I'm trying to tell you because I keep wanting to watch, oh, look, it's Jeddah again.
Right.
That's so pretty. It's such a beautiful movie. Just the colors and the contrasts and every planetary location. I mean, sometimes you'd get these locations and even in The Force Awakens, we're like, oh, a desert planet. Okay. Is that Tatooine? No, it's called Jakku. You sure it's not Tatooine? Okay. So, but I mean, in this, we get such different locations. Jeddah does not look like Tatooine to me.
No.
You have, you have a planet like the Ring of Kafrene. I'm like, that is awesome. I love that visual of that planet. And it's so different than what we see in the other movie. I love the whole spiritual side of things with the Force. It is the influence of the Force without focusing on the mysticism side of things, which you get in droves in the other movies.
Right.
I think it's perfect that this movie pulls back because this is supposed to be a period of time, before the dark times, before the Empire. This is the dark times when the Force is not as evident as it was when the Jedi were at their height. And so I love the fact that there are no Jedi in this, and you have people that maybe while they can kind of sense the Force a bit, or at least they have faith that the Force is there, they can't command the Force or they can't use the Force the way a Jedi can. And I think that's perfect. I think it's perfect to show how the rebellion, this is where it fits in perfectly with the original trilogy. The rebellion in the original trilogy was always desperate. They were just always on the edge of desperation. They were pretty much always losing. And this movie is an excellent backstory to all of that, to remind you that the rebellion's practically about to fall apart. Like in this movie, those are the stakes, is things are about to fall apart. They can't agree with each other. It's all about everything they've worked towards up to this point is about to fall apart. But we know in the back of our minds, if we've seen the movies that come chronologically after this, it's going to be okay. we get to see how it gets to be okay. We get to see how it takes somebody who does, a rebellion who as kids we were like, yeah, the rebellion against the Empire. Those guys are the heroes. They're awesome. They're the good guys. But it shows that, in the real world, sometimes in situations like this, questionable things have to be done.
Right.
Well, how can you get from people doing questionable things to, yeah, these are the heroes, these are the good guys? And I think this movie does a great job of bridging that gap between the questionable tactics of the rebellion, of terrorists, the fact that we see that there are different factions within the rebellion itself.
Right.
Saw Gerrera's faction versus Mon Mothma's. I love all of that backstory. There's such an intricacy to everything that, the great George Lucas, I do love the original trilogy movies, but there's not that intricacy in storytelling in the prequels. And this is, I wish, in my mind, in my little headcanon, I wish you could give Gareth Edwards or somebody else the prequels and say, hey, you want to go remake those?
Yes.
Please.
And I'd be fine with that. I'd be totally fine with that. There's, like the alternate, what do some people call it? The alternate universe video store. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I want in my alternate universe video store is I want prequels that look like this. And I want prequels where the acting is like this. And I want prequels where the Jedi are mystical beings again, I don't need to know about, excuse me. I was going to say midichlorians, but I started to throw up a little bit. Sorry. Give me I might need to take a drink for a second. Yeah. So, but back to the mystical, when you get to Jeddah and you see the temple, the Temple Mount, and you see these fallen statues of these massive Jedi statues, I'm just sitting there going, yeah, give me a Jen Erso series. Give me a series that just takes place on Jeddah. Like I would love to see, I would love to see like Old Republic Jeddah. I would love to. So I hope if they do some movies where they're going back, whatever it is, 1,000 years in time, I'd love to see Jeddah or something like it. If they choose to do that by going back in time in any future movies. One of my favorite locations in the comics, reading comics as a kid was, and I don't know any comic book readers, whether you pronounce it Ossus or Ossus. It was kind of like the original birthplace of the Jedi back in the comics. I was like, I'd love to see that planet. Like I'd love to see original Jedi temples where the Jedi lived when it was old school stuff and lightsabers were made out of wood and, all that. That's the kind of stuff I would love to see more of. And it's just this movie, along with the mystical side of things, I think does just an excellent job of giving context to a lot of the other things we see in the other Star Wars movies, gets those moral questions. These movies are supposed to be, I'm using my quote fingers, for kids, but graffiti. That's cool. Wow, technology's great. But yeah, it gets to the moral questions. It's still a movie that I can watch with my kids, for the most part. There's some intense scenes that I might wait until the kids are a little bit older. But my kids are old enough, so it's totally fine. But it's got the kind of moral issues that adults will appreciate and want to wrestle with. And that's what I think, this is a grown-up Star Wars movie. And the last thing I think I will say is, and I apologize to any Star Wars fans that are going to hate me for saying it this way, but of all the Star Wars movies that I've watched in my travels, this one is the most human.
Well done, sir.
Because and that's what makes that final scene with Vader coming down that hallway so amazing, is this has been a Star Wars movie about humans. And it's going to make it sound like I'm bashing the Jedi. I am absolutely not. But we've spent the movie watching these humans try to deal with their issues, try to get through all their problems, the obstacles, the war, the struggle, the everything else. And then what I think is, what this movie did for me was it brought back a terrifying Darth Vader, because Darth Vader was kind of defanged, by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, still the villain, but, not quite the same, because he's Luke's dad and he's probably going to get redeemed and it's going to be okay. But this brought back the terrifying Darth Vader. And I think the fact that the movie had no other Jedi, and then you get to the end and there is this unstoppable mystical spiritual force with a full choir in the background while he's smashing people to pieces and throwing them against the ceiling. That scene, I think, was so effective because you didn't have any other examples of that in the rest of the movie, because the movie was so human and dealing with human level problems. When you do bring that in for the last few, how many seconds that movie, that scene in the movie lasts, it is outstanding. And it is just, it is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I will say somehow magically every room that I'm in, no matter where I'm watching it, gets very, very dusty as it gets to the end of this movie. Cause I don't know why, but I can start like my mouth start watering. So rooms get very dusty when I watch this movie. I can't explain it, but every single time I watch this, especially when I get to the end and you've got that scene where, since Carrie Fisher has passed away, every time I get to that scene at the end of the movie, I'm just like, oh, why don't you just snap my heart in half one more time?
Right.
Every single time. From the moment we pan up from the mushroom cloud on Scarif to, the moment she says hope and we go into hyperspace, it's like that whole segment of the movie just tears me apart every single time. And I will say, I don't think any other movie gets that kind of consistent reaction out of me, but this one does.
Yeah, I lose it when Jin's watching the hologram of her dad.
Yes.
The expression on her face is just unbelievable, and like all of her emotions of missing her father comes out at that one scene. Just your heart breaks for her. So
you can see like 16 years of emotion, all just at the breaking of the dam.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, it's fantastic. So a little nod to The Mandalorian. There's that great video online where they take the Vader scene and put it alongside of the Skywalker scene in The Mandalorian. It says, and the caption says, "Don't get caught in a hallway with a Skywalker." It's like, yes.
Yep.
Yes. And if you know what I'm talking about, yes, you're welcome.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Andrew, something you love about this movie?
I think, obviously John touched on a lot there. But I think the one that I really want to dial in on is how beautifully shot this movie is. The cinematography is better than anything we had seen in Star Wars up to this point. I really like the cinematography in the Force Awakens, but it's more generic action movie. It's got that very J.J. Abrams feel, whereas like the opening scene of this, on Galen's farm, when you're watching him walking through the crop and then the dark troopers are walking towards him, just right out of the gate, you can see how beautiful this movie is going to be. And they don't ease up. I think a lot of that comes from Gareth's like visual effects background.
Right.
Like one of my absolute favorite shots, like I want a poster of them constructing the Death Star and the way the shadows are playing in space.
Yes.
It is absolutely beautiful in a way that I think can be done in a good space setting that Star Wars hasn't ever capitalized on. The drama of it and the contrast of it's just stunning. But then even on smaller things like, the costume design with the Rebels, he put so much attention to detail where he married like the war movie, the World War II feel and the sci-fi feel, and also really captured the original trilogy, like the 70s hair and mustaches and the sort of outdated designs, but he made them feel much more like textured and real. And so I just think time after time, I find myself staring at this like slack-jawed because it's like more beautiful than Star Wars is supposed to be. Even the mushroom cloud, as Jin and Cassian are watching the blast come towards them, it's stunningly beautiful.
Well, even Krennic says the one on Jeddah goes, "Oh, it's beautiful." It's like, it is, but it's just it's terrible at the same time. But yes, no, 100%. Yeah, I know Gareth Edwards went out of his way to make sure that everybody had sideburns and made sure it looked like they were in 1976. So yeah, I love that. I love that detail too. Yeah, you're right. It is more beautiful than any Star Wars movie has the right to be, for sure.
I'm sitting here thinking, just shot after shot keeps popping in my head. The AT-AT coming through the smoke, as Chirrut sees it, like that's such a beautiful shot, and it's like there's just so many of them. Like they keep popping out. I'm like that one, oh yeah, and that one, oh yeah, and that one, and to be able to pull that off in a movie that's so packed with other things going on is really cool.
Yeah, right. Scott.
I've got a list, but I'll try to keep it quick.
I have too, so you're good. Go ahead.
top of that list has got to be K2SO, one of my favorite droids in Star Wars, expertly played by Alan Tudyk.
Of course.
I love that actor so much. His lines, his physical humor, what he brought to that masterful comedic timing that I think is a really important element that helps Star Wars movies work. Not when they're trying to be funny, but when they just infuse that right kind of humor, that right kind of blend, it pulls you out of the movie. I think when Han Solo was doing it, it was kind of like, all right, well, yeah, there's magic and stuff. Like it brings it down to earth a little bit and helps to kind of bring you in. I just thought he did such a great job. And the design of the droid, going back to Ralph's originals and coming up with something that doesn't seem like it's practically possible, but was just so well done. I mean, I know it was a lot of motion capture, but it just looked so fantastic. I couldn't help but notice that his head kind of looks like a skull without the bottom jaw.
Yes, that's
very interesting. It added to the kind of creepiness, even though he's supposed to be this, kind of lovable character, even though there's no warmth to him whatsoever. John, I totally agree. The use of the Force as something to believe in, some kind of universal binding element. I know that in one of the featurettes in that set, it talks about the force of others, and specifically Baze and Chirrut performed so well by Donnie Yen and Zhang Wen. I had no idea that there were massive superstars in Asia and around the world that have worked together for a while, and they had great chemistry, and the way that they genuinely perform as people, there's some moments when it seems like Chirrut might have force-based abilities, but there's nothing to suggest that he is force sensitive or is to that point. It's just that he has such strong belief in it, and that refrain that they have, that line that I'm sure is going to come back later, and the way that it's mirrored there at the end, when Baze says it back to Chirrut, it's one of those moments, John, like you're right. It brings me to tears. It's hard to talk about. I also have to give a little bit of credit. The actor that you pointed out that was the Rebel flight controller was actually the writer of the screenplay. Tony Gilroy did that performance. I'm not saying that he needs to be, in more acting roles or anything else like that, but it's just fun to see them kind of get into that role. The fact that it was Donnie's idea, though, to make Chirrut a blind swordsman makes it that much cooler. The puppetry and the practical effects blew me away. The practical creature effects specifically, coming back to doing that kind of thing and being as practically creative as they were with the original trilogy, being inventive and coming up with new things. Like you mentioned that, I forget his name, but the alien that kind of tells everybody that the AT-AT is coming, right? The jaw that opens so wide is not CG. That's all practical. It's brilliant. The father and daughter dynamic between Galen and Jin, you're right with that scene. That kills me. Any scene where they're interacting with each other, I think they just got that dynamic so right. And I really respect that. I think that's great writing. The fact that it has that seamless tie into A New Hope, the fact that they brought back pilots from the original from A New Hope in that footage. And I think there's a lot to be said about the advancement of CG characters in this with Tarkin and Leia. It's not to say that they're absolutely perfect, but I think they were used so well that, especially for Tarkin, it never takes me out of the moment. I never look for the wires.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. That last line by Leia, every single time. It's Iron Giant, it's Niagara Falls, Frankie Angel, like every single time.
No, I think that Guy Henry was channeling his inner Peter Cushing when he was doing the voice work for Tarkin. I think I don't hate the CG like some people with Tarkin. I think they nailed it with him. I don't think Peter Cushing has ever looked that good, to be honest.
Totally agree.
Yeah, they did a great job with that for sure.
Right. I want to go back to something you just said too, because you mentioned Donnie Yen's performance, and I mean the whole cast. You could single anybody out, but
Yes.
if you aren't familiar with Donnie Yen's like martial arts movies or work, he is astounding.
Yeah,
absolutely love him. He was, when they first announced this movie, his name was the one that probably got me the most excited. I was like, Donnie Yen in a Star Wars movie is amazing. I'm a huge fan of the Ip Man series. He plays the martial arts teacher, the guy who taught Bruce Lee, and it's just absolutely incredible. So yeah, if anybody listening to this, if you're not familiar with Donnie Yen outside of Star Wars, go check him out. He's incredible.
the choreography of his battle scenes are beautiful.
Yes.
And it doesn't look staged. It just looks so fluid and perfect. And it's even the line that he says, "It was at your foot." Like it's so well done.
If you want to see the stuff that influenced him, I got this when my dad passed away. I was able to get some of his movie collections that he had. I've got the like 6 or 7 movie set of Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman. If you ever want to see some of the stuff that I think really would have inspired his performance and that character, you got to check those out, because that's absolutely where a lot of his stuff comes from.
Very cool.
So
Very
much
cool.
fun.
All right, Disney John.
I don't know if I should be upset that you saved me till last or
No, I still have to go too. So
I mean, like, I feel like everything's been said, but I will say
there has it, because I have things I want to say that have not been said.
Well, there's one thing that for this movie, for me particular, because I'm all about the storytelling. I mean, that's why I worked for Disney. That's why I'm Disney John. I love the story, and I love how this tells the story that we've only heard about for 9 flipping movies, right? Like from a Star Wars: A New Hope, it started, and you hear about this rebel spy stealing these plans, and it wasn't told until 10 movies later that we find out who the rebels are and what their stories are. The human quality that you talked about, John, in this is evident from beginning to end. These are not mystical Jedi. These are not magical characters. They're not like, it's the Joe down the street. It's the Jane from up the street. And they decide, you know what? This Rebel Alliance seems like something that I need to be a part of. And here we go. I love this movie. Like man, you're going to go to No Sir, I Didn't Like It soon. And I don't know what I'm going to say there, but this story needed to be told. And I don't think anybody else could have told it any better than how it was. Like, I genuinely mean that this is the most perfect movie I've ever seen in my entire life. In 55 years, this is the movie that I've been waiting for, and I'm waiting now for the next one. So I'll be 110 when the next one comes around.
Wow, that's a commitment.
Well, but I mean, like, honestly, like, I agree with everything that's been said here. There's nothing else that I can't disagree with anything that's been said. It's a phenomenal movie. There are so many things about this movie that are correct. I love that there are no Jedi in this. Like, absolutely, I agree with everyone about this. Like, there are no Jedi in this, so you don't have, like, you're not looking for a lightsaber. You're not looking for any of that kind of stuff. You're looking at these rebels. You're looking at these people, humans that are living in this society that has been created around them, and how it like sparks this rebellion, and you're seeing the beginning of it and why it happened, and you're just like, yeah, go good guys or bad guys, really, depending on the point of view that you take.
Right. So I have a couple things that I want to mention before we move on.
Just a couple.
Well, the other ones have been said. The character introductions in this movie are freaking fantastic. Most of the time, when we meet somebody, you get a really good understanding of them right away. Andor is a good guy, sort of, but he's willing to kill an innocent to protect the cause. Like, when you first meet him, he's talking to that guy, and he's like, "Oh, it'll be okay," and then he shoots in the back. I'm like, okay, wasn't expecting that. That kind of shocked me. K2SO makes his appearance presence known immediately during Jin's escape, which is hilarious. You get a sense of how strong he is, plus his attitude. Congratulations, you're being rescued. Don't move. It's like, okay. Sure, it gives us his personality in that brief exchange he has with Jin, which and then of course you have Baz like in the back. So we meet them, and you're like kind of have an understanding about what he's about, and I love that. And certainly Krennic's intro, on Galen's planet when he's already, well, let's kill the mom, go find the kid. You know, I'm a horrible person and I'll do anything to succeed and I don't care about anybody else. I mean, we got that the very first time we see that character. And I think that's really good storytelling. You know, you don't have to, you know, tell us a lot. You can show us and we go, okay, we understand that person. We get that, you know, and I think that was very, very, very well done. I love that at the core of this story, it's a redemption of almost all the characters on the rebel side. You know, they even say that right before they go to Scarif. You know, a lot of us have done things we were not proud of. We've done it all in the name of the rebellion. So those guys getting on the shuttle are all doing it as a redemption story. Bodhi's doing it because, you know, he was working for the Empire and I was like, you know what, I got it. I can't be this person. Galen sacrificed himself to do the right thing. It's a redemption story and not like the cheesy one we got in the original trilogy, but it's a very, you know, these people all done horrible things and they're like, I need to get right with myself and this is how I'm going to do it because it's important. I think a lot of people miss that watching it the first time, and it's something that I think it needs to be pointed out and pay attention to because I think it's really important. We mentioned the gritty battle scenes. They're fantastic. If there was actual blood, this movie would be rated R because there's bodies flying everywhere. I mean, you put this on the, you know, banks. It's like it's Saving Private Ryan in space at a couple times. Amen. You know, it's just like, oh my God, it's done so well. We mentioned Michael Cimino earlier. He had 4.5 weeks to write this score.
Jeez.
You know, because the person they had
crazy.
Yeah, the person they had left the project and he had just finished one and he came in this one 4.5 weeks. That and
my goodness.
And to give us something that great, yes, that's quite impressive. So those are the things I wanted to make sure I mentioned because, I mean, I will not say it's perfect like Disney John said, but it's pretty damn close. You know what I mean? It's, you know,
I was going to be in your camp up until now.
It's comparing it to the other Star Wars too, because I think you talked a lot about these characters' motivation, and especially with like stories like this, it's all about character for me. And every single person on that ship, like you knew what their motivation was. Even you mentioned Bodhi, played by Riz Ahmed, amazing character, and he's so little screen time, but you know, I absolutely, by the end of it, I love him. I know why he's there and I know what he's doing and what he's capable of.
Right.
And over 3 movies, Finn is trying to do the same thing and you don't really know what he's doing or why he's doing it or care.
Right.
And I think they were, you know, and every single individual in this movie, you get so much out of so little screen time and so little dialogue. And I think that's just really, really impressive storytelling and also a testament to the cast. I mean, you mentioned like Ben Mendelsohn is just so disgustingly evil, but in a way that still feels real. And I think a lot of people would just play that over the top and he doesn't. So it's from a character driven standpoint, it's absolutely incredible. Even if it had nothing to do with getting the Death Star plans, I think they've done such a good job that I don't even care. If this didn't tie into A New Hope at all, I wouldn't care. It's just so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at
Director Krennic is just such a great example of what's wrong with the Empire. Because, talk about the rebellion being so desperate because they just don't have the resources and they don't have the people and they don't have the ships and they're trying to cobble everything together. But the Empire has got everything. They've got the resources, they've got the money, they've got the power, the control, all of this, and they're just so completely worthless when it comes to following through with things. And if somebody like Krennic gets to the level of director, I mean, it's like, what was the phrase I heard somebody say the other day? People get promoted to managerial positions because they get promoted to the level of mediocrity they're capable of.
Wow.
That's failure upwards.
And I say that I say that as someone who got promoted from being a classroom teacher to being a director of instructional technology. No, I'm only ratting on myself for that one, but you know, it's kind of that thing. It's like he must have just been a really good stormtrooper who got promoted from stormtrooper to something else, to like junior officer, and then he was really good junior officer, so he got promoted, and by the time he got up to director, all the skills that made him good at the things he did before were not the skills that he needed to be a good director in the Empire. So he kind of sucks, and he's not very good at it. And that's, to me, I feel like what we see sometimes played a little bit over the top with some of the other characters in the Star Wars movies, we get a sense of, okay, well, if a lot of the leadership in the Empire is like Krennic, that's why they die in the end. That's why they're going to lose when all this is said and done, because if that's the best of the best, then,
right?
I guess until Thrawn comes back, this is what you got to deal with.
Well, to be fair, Admiral Piet was pretty good too until he, he's the only one that Vader didn't kill. Like, was on his ship with him all the time.
Right.
He pretty much started, but anyway. One other thing I did want to mention, I loved all the subtle, not so subtle nods to episode 4. We mentioned the pilots on the Battle of Scarif, which was unused, footage from episode 4. So I thought that was really cool. The 2 guys from the cantina, they bump into on Jeddah. I love that. I remember in the theater, I went,
yes.
I know
yes.
So, and of course you have 3PO and R2D2 hanging out on Yavin, and you have John Dodonna there at the table. So there's lots of really well placed nods to later movies, and I think that was
almost have to be there though, because it's such a perfect marriage between.
Yes.
Right. I mean,
I don't know if they have to be there, but I think it was.
But they're part of the rebellion. They're such a big part of the rebellion in 4. Like, you see them as being heads of this rebellion, and if you didn't see them in Rogue One, you'd almost be like, how does this merge into the rest of the story?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I don't.
I mean, they were young. They were.
I know.
I mean, there's. Yeah, I'm just saying.
I know. Either way.
I know you don't think it's a perfect movie now, so.
Well, Dayton, along those lines, like, there are so many web lines that come out of this, right? Like Mon Mothma's story,
right,
that we see in Andor would not necessarily have been possible without seeing this, and that gives you so much more insight into what she had to go through, how it connects to different people with different perspectives. Everybody arguing at that council table has a valid point, right? So it's interesting to see all that kind of debate and discussion around just trying to get something done. There's a Death Star out there. We have to get rid of it. Oh, but this. All valid. I'm not saying they're right arguments, but
I was going to say
valid arguments.
Let's scatter.
Right?
Let's be cowards. Let's do
right. But you can see how it touches so many other parts of the universe, which I think is one of the things that broadens it, to not just say, let's just rehash the same Star Wars stories over and over again. Let's explore this universe a bit further.
Yeah, and we've touched on Andor a couple times, and obviously Mon Mothma's through the line. So Andor was made by Tony Gilroy, who was one of the writers for this, was the showrunner for Andor. And I think that obviously shows not just stylistically, but that he wanted to continue to develop some of those ideas he had here.
Yeah.
That was those 3, A New Hope and Rogue One and Andor. I'm so happy to be in a room with other people who seem to enjoy Andor.
Absolutely.
Happen
just watched it.
Yeah, in my group of friends, that doesn't seem to happen around here, but
that's okay. They can be wrong. It's fine.
Everybody has the right to be wrong, and usually it's not me. But those 3 to me are like the inception of Star Wars. Like, and I mentioned it earlier, Episode 4 is made better by Rogue One. Rogue One is made better by Andor. Like, being able to see all of those together, I'm like, because I loved Rogue One, and I was like, Andor, is it going to be able to build on anything? After watching Andor, I'm like, okay, now I have a new appreciation for a bunch of different things that are happening in Rogue One.
Right.
So it just ends up snowballing into Rogue One makes me appreciate, A New Hope even more. Andor makes me appreciate Rogue One even more. If somebody wants to go back and do a show before Andor that makes Andor even bit, go for it. I'm all for it. Do the dream within the dream.
Right. I will say that they seem to be doing a very good job with their Star Wars series. And I mean, Ahsoka was fantastic. The Mandalorian just keeps getting better. I even like the Book of Boba Fett. So I was, I don't have any problems with those, and whatever. So like I said, I think we need a Jyn Erso show. I think there's, the Obi-Wan series was pretty good too. Not as much.
That gave me chills.
See, I still didn't. I don't think I liked it as much as Andor or Ahsoka. I don't think I enjoyed it as much.
I agree.
mean, it's
that
still
would be
good.
my third.
It's still good, but
it hit for different reasons.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that makes me appreciate the prequels and what the prequels wanted to do, even if they didn't execute it perfectly, what they opened up. And that's just the thing. Yeah.
That's fair.
Exactly.
That's fair. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the first half of our Rogue One episode. There's lots of great discussion, and it took us over 2 hours. So I'm doing everyone a favor and splitting it in half. So this wraps up the first part. Come back in a couple days for part 2 of our discussion of one of the best Star Wars, if not the best Star Wars movies, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. May the Force be with us. Wasn't
By the
that
way,
the
John,
Running Scared episode we did with him?
Yep.
We had to redo the whole damn thing. That was fun. Thanks,
No,
Jeff.
that wasn't Running Scared. That was, what was that?
No, we had to do Running Scared twice.
We did?
Ouch, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oof.
See, I can't.
He's done it a couple of times, but I know with me it was Running Scared. So
Interesting.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it is
I
what it
love
is.
Running Scared. That needs a redemption.
Are we going there again? That movie.
We were there every time.
That
It's
movie.
not. It's not Cobra. It's no Cobra. I'll say that.
Don't even get me started on that movie. Just don't. It's like every time Jeff tries to defend a movie, I'm like, but you like Cobra. So it's
Yep. And
Well,
John, I just got to mention the first thing I see is your Rocketeer helmet. It's one of my favorite posters of all time.
Yes.
Love the Rocketeer.
It's one of my favorite movies.
all right. Do we have any questions before we get rolling, guys?
So we're talking about Galaxy Quest, right?
Don't start.
You asked. I mean,
Don't even start.
No, Running Scared. He said we're doing Running Scared.
oh, that's
Let's
right. I'm
go.
sorry. Hold on, let me find those show notes.
Every time John's on here, he's always making fun.
I'm sorry. It was my understanding this was the Alien 3
Ooh.
podcast. Is that?
That's the Shirley guys.
I need to
everyone's
switch
going
my
to trash
notes
that movie.
I'm sorry. I need to switch my notes. That was everything I had.
All right. Actually, John, it was
what
because
is
of your episode that I rewatched it. I found a copy of the assembly cut or whatever it is at Half Price Books. I went ahead and bought it so I can watch it. And so, yeah, I didn't love it when I saw it in the theater, but knowing everything that happened in the production of that movie, that's a pretty decent quality movie considering everything that was working against him. So
considering the nightmare everybody was going through to
it's another one of those situations where it's like, studio, stay the hell out of it.
So Dayton, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this one point before we begin. You like Cobra, the 1986 Stallone movie?
No, I don't. Jeff does.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was like really going to have to start questioning some of your views.
No,
Okay.
Jeff thinks it's great. I'm like that. I have a list, a
Then I
laundry
have
list
no
of things that's wrong
problem
with that
calling
damn
Jeff
movie.
out on that one. Okay.
I call him out all the time.
that movie's the reason I cut my pizza with scissors.
Right. It's also the reason fries swim in ketchup. Whatever. That's such a bad movie.
Here it comes. Sorry.
See, you got me wound up.
I did it.
You got me. The whole negative side of me came out. Stop.
Yeah, twice so far. Let's see if we can do it during the podcast.
All right, let's talk about the standalone movie that's almost as good as Solo. All right, so
wait.
What?
Now, wait. I like Solo, so don't knock that. Let's just don't even start with that.
Okay, here we go.
This is a safe place. This is a safe place.
It is a safe place. It is a safe place. All right. If we are ready, let me get a drink here.
Bring on the fight.
All right. And 3, 2,